Breaking news, and we are live. Come on in, everyone. JLR Investigates got some new information in the Richard Allen Delphi murder case. Jailhouse phone calls being revealed today in court, Carroll County, Indiana. Richard Allen on trial for the 217 murders of two innocent little girls. On the High Bridge Trail. We've been talking about this case extensively. We're about 2 weeks into this trial. The prosecution most likely will rest today, maybe tomorrow. But all morning, folks, jailhouse prison phone call conversations have been shared to the jury. Packed courtroom. It's not televised. We've been talking about this case extensively every day, giving you the latest twists and turns and what is being said in court. I'm going to bring Magnolia in the chat. We are on a continuation from this morning. We had to cut the feed off this morning when we talked about prison phone calls. We also talked about Walla, right, the psychologist, because she's a key player in this whole case. And, you know, a detective or one of the law enforcement today spoke too. I guess he's a trooper. He spoke, but was like kind of going off what Walla said. And then we got Brad Weber. Then we're also going to talk about the third, the possible other people involved here that the defense wants to put on the record, including a guy named Elvis Fields. We're going to share some info about Elvis Fields. Will Fran Gull allow the defense to bring up Odinism and paganism and ritualism and all that ritualistic stuff? Remains to be seen. She hasn't denied that motion at this time that was submitted yesterday. Let's get Magnolia in the chat and talk about these jailhouse phone calls, because apparently Richard Allen made a lot of calls. Hundreds, I believe, of calls. Hours and hours of calls to his wife, possibly his parents, and who knows who else. Saying a lot of things. And it seems like these calls, based off people putting the information out on Twitter about what's going on in the courtroom, these calls started in November. So, a couple weeks after he was arrested. And then, April, it seems like a lot of stuff is coming out from April. It seems like Richard Allen pled allegiance to God at the beginning of April. And then after that, it seems like all these types of confessions. Now, are they legit or are they not? There's word that McClelland's in that courtroom cherry picking what can be shown and what cannot be shown and listened to. So it will be interesting. Let's get Magnolia in the chat. She is like looking all over the internet right now and reading some of the people that are in the courthouse giving their assessment. Now the morning session went on break. Now they're probably going to break within the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so for lunch. We'll probably get some more information from that point to find out what's up with these confessions or alleged confessions. Hello, Magnolia.
Hello.
Hold on. Let me get you on speaker. Are you there?
Yeah.
Roger that. Talk to us, Magnolia. What's up? What is going on with these phone calls that are being played in court right now?
Well, we're going through audio calls with Richard Allen and his wife and mother so far. Now, first things first, so this morning when court started, just to let people know, before the jury came in, Richard Allen was there. They said he was there. It looked like he was praying at the table just before 9 a.m. And once they went into session at 9 o'clock, the state had submitted a motion where they were trying to admit some sort of an exhibit. And we don't know what the exhibit was, but the defense objected, saying that they had not seen it before, and Judge Gull actually ruled in the defense's favor.
Well, they should be able to see whatever is going to be presented, right? Beforehand.
Yeah, so whatever it was, she denied the prosecutor's request for that exhibit. And then after that, they said that they wanted to admit 7 Department of Corrections calls between Allen and his wife and mother. The defense objected, saying that the prosecution omitted a phone call where Allen actually says he's innocent and describes the hardships at Westville. So he's saying that the calls that the prosecutor is wanting to submit are incomplete because he specifically omitted the stuff where Richard said that he's innocent.
Wait. Omitted in that call, or omitted an actual whole call, like excluded a particular call or stuff within a call?
Well, I think it's one specific call entirely that they're wanting to omit, and so they're saying that makes the calls incomplete because they're cherry picking, basically, which is kind of a theme we keep seeing here. So he's saying you should play all the calls because all the calls put together are one continuous communication of him going back and forth, talking to his wife, etc., going on and on. So by omitting the part where he says he's innocent, the defense is saying we're not getting the full picture. So Judge Gull actually admitted the calls
All
that
of
the
them.
prosecutor wants to present, and she told the defense that they can play the omitted call when it's their turn to present their case. And she remarked that it might make their argument stronger if they say that the state omitted this certain call, right? So she's kind of telling them, well, you'll get your chance to play that call if you want when it's your turn to present, and you can actually argue that the prosecution omitted information and it might make your argument better. So that's how she handled it. Now there's also some photos that the state wants to admit from Allen's phone showing his appearance before the arrest. For some reason, the defense wants the dates on those photos removed. I'm not sure why, but Judge Gull said she deferred that particular ruling until after lunch. So it's going to give the defense a chance to kind of look over that stuff and see what the photos are, I guess. So then around 9:30 or so, court started, and they had Harshman. This is what is he? The ISP trooper.
Trooper. So he's the trooper. A trooper testified, and what did the So what did the trooper say?
So he testified that Richard Allen had made incriminating statements in his phone calls, saying, for example, in November 11th, 2022, he talked about a call with Allen to Kathy where he said, basically Richard Allen was saying to Kathy, I don't want to upset you anymore. Tell the investigators to come get me. I will tell them whatever they want to hear.
Whoa. What's
so
that
he's
mean?
telling Kathy if things are becoming too difficult for her, that he would just tell detectives whatever they want to hear.
Do you consider that a confession? That statement?
Well, I mean, when you say that you're going to tell someone whatever they want to hear, that doesn't indicate truthfulness. It's just whatever you want to hear. So it's like, I guess, if you're accusing me of something and you're constantly accusing me of it, and then I say, well, fine, I'll just tell you whatever you want to hear, just so you'll leave me alone or whatever. I mean, that doesn't seem like me admitting to doing what was wrong. It just means that I'm trying to placate you and get you to leave me alone, basically. So that's kind of how he said it. This was from Wish TV reporting, Kyla Russell. He said, let's see.
Well,
Allen tells Kath, huh?
No, I wanted to share something that Kyla Russell put out there, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I have information from this article from Kyla Russell's report, News 8. She said Alan told Kathy that he would call the detectives and tell them whatever they want to hear if things become too much for her. They played a call from November 14th, 2022, where again he says to Kathy, "I don't want to upset you anymore. Tell the investigators to come get me. I will tell them whatever they want me to." And Kathy says in the call, "I wish I could hug you." And a few of the reporters in court today noted that Kathy Allen, while the tapes were being played, she was crying softly.
So this was put out by Kyla Russell. So this is interesting. This is an interesting tweet. It says, she says, new state police master trooper, so they're called master troopers, testified he's listened to over 700 calls Richard Allen made while in custody. 700 calls.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. You know, that's a lot of money too. You know, these calls ain't cheap. He explained how Allen's detailed confession made to a psychologist in May 2023 about his actions on February 13th, 2017 led him to watching the Bridge Guy video again and believing it was Richard Allen's voice that said "down the hill." More info on this. So basically is what they're saying is, he's saying is once Allen confessed to his psychologist, then it compelled that trooper to go back to the video where that voice says "down the hill," and he thinks it's Richard Allen's voice.
Yeah,
but he's not an expert when it comes to voice analysis, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, that raises a few questions more than it explains anything, because first of all, the detailed confession made to his psychologist was not on tape, first of all. So he wouldn't have heard Richard Allen saying anything in that confession because it wasn't one of the ones that's recorded, A. B, people are wondering how this state police master trooper, how did he have access to Richard Allen's psychologist notes in the first place?
Well,
is it like people are wondering, is that like a violation of HIPAA if his psychology notes are being shared around? Like, that's just a question that people are asking.
We talked about that a little bit. According to Indiana statute, once somebody confesses to a crime, a murder, to a psychologist, it's fair game to be open. The conversation at that point can be disclosed to people. So did he get the master trooper get that information, once it was revealed that Allen confessed to a psychologist, therefore had access to his note, to the psychologist's notes after this alleged confession?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question people have. It's, it's interesting, like, because just to repeat this, he explained how Allen's detailed confession made to a psychologist in May 2023 led him to watching the Bridge Guy video again and believing it was Richard Allen's voice that said "down the hill." Now, I don't know if Kyla Russell is missing some context in this report, but certainly the confession in question was not audio. There was no audio of that. It was not recorded. So I'm not really sure what he's trying to say here. But I think
maybe there is audio and we just never heard it.
Well, I think what we're getting at is that more than this specific confession, he's probably referring to the fact that he listened to over 700 calls. So it's probably he heard the voice in the phone calls, and then he rewatched the Bridge video to compare the voice that he'd been hearing. So I think that's probably more accurate.
When was Richard Allen's defense attorneys officially on board on his case? November 2022? Like, when did they officially get bored? When did he officially get an attorney? I mean, it had to be appointed instantly, but there were some issues around him being transferred all over the place, and he didn't have access to an attorney for a while, correct? And it was like a month after the fact or something. Can someone give me a date in the court or in the chat? When did they officially get on board on his case? Does anyone know? Do you know, Magnolia?
No, I just know that initially he did not have attorneys. He said he was going to get his own attorneys, and then at some point early into it, he wrote a letter to the court saying he's indigent and asking for representation. So I don't know exactly the date that they joined his case.
The reason why is attorneys have an obligation, whatever. Even if you had an arraignment attorney for an arraignment, whatever, and then eventually get your own counsel, whatever. From the beginning stages, an ethical attorney is supposed to tell their client, do not talk on that phone. Don't say anything on that phone. Don't talk to people about your case. I mean, they might not tell you to actually not talk on the phone. What I mean is, don't talk about your case on the phone. Period.
Yeah.
Period. And some smart lawyers tell people not to talk on the phone at all.
Yeah.
For this very same reason. Did his attorneys tell him, yeah, you could talk. You could talk to Kathy 700 times? And then it's 700 times while he's in solitary confinement. Are you crazy?
That's a ton of phone calls.
Dude, this could very well be what buries him. If he would have just stayed off the phone, none of this stuff could be taken out of context, whether it's true or not, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you talking on the phone? You just want to talk to somebody because you're lonely and solitary? Maybe it's a tactic they do, and they know you can't, when it's like putting a carrot in front of a rabbit, and you're in a cell. Hey, Alan, you want to talk on the phone to somebody? Phone time. Yeah. You have a prison collect call from Richard Allen from the Indiana Department of Corrections. Kathy's like, yeah, Richard, what's going on? Oh, yeah. I want to say I did this and I did that and I did this and I did this. You know, when I was indicted in 2003, I was indicted. I actually got picked up at the beginning of 2003 by the federal government. FBI picked me up in Tampa. I was held in but I had an out-of-state warrant, right? My indictment was in Houston, Texas. I was picked up in Florida. So I was in a county jail in Tampa, and then eventually the lawyer got a lawyer, and I could have challenged extradition, whatever like that. He said that's a lost cause, just sign over, whatever like that, get this process over with, whatever. So signed over, and they sent me to Houston, right? That takes a long process. They put you on Con Air, and they fly you to different like drop-off sites like Atlanta and federal prison, Miami and Atlanta, and eventually to Oklahoma City, and then eventually Oklahoma City to Houston. Well, I remember the beginning stages. The attorney, public defender, told me, do not talk on that phone. Don't talk to your family. Don't talk to anybody on that phone. Do not. Because anything can be construed as anything, whether it's a confession or not, take your words out of context, or even leading people can warrant additional charges like obstruction of justice. You tell somebody go do something, whatever, on that phone. I didn't talk on the phone to my family, literally, until after I was sentenced 2 years later. In the detention, I didn't get a bond because I was a flight risk in their eyes. I didn't talk to my family for 2 years. Until I was adjudicated, and until I called my mother crying, telling her I got 10 years in prison for a nonviolent white-collar crime.
Mm-hmm.
When I was actually told I was only going to get a couple years. That was like the shock. Imagine standing in front of the judge thinking you're getting a couple years, and a couple years turns into a decade. For a nonviolent crime with no prior criminal history of nothing. That's a whole other argument. But my point is, I didn't even talk to my family for almost 2 years. I was eventually sentenced 2005. almost 2 years without even speaking to my family on the phone. And most attorneys will tell their client, don't talk on the phone. Don't talk on that phone. Don't talk on that phone. Richard Allen makes 700 phone calls at least while incarcerated in what? A year and a half span? 2 years. 2 years. This is two. You know, he got arrested on Halloween, didn't he?
A few days, I think, before Halloween. The
But 2
public
years ago.
officially learned of it on Halloween, but he was taken into custody on October 26th.
So why wasn't Baldwin Rozzi telling this dude to stay the heck off the phone?
Well, I don't know.
Or did they and he just didn't listen?
I mean, I don't know, but I think that ship has sailed, clearly, because he did make phone calls. He made 700 calls, and that's what we're here to talk about.
But, Magnolia...
He made 700 calls, evidently.
But the ship sailed. But the problem is, up until this stuff, I haven't seen them, like, nailing him. Now, regardless if you think he's railroad, innocent, and even if you feel he's guilty, it's by all means necessary. This could be the one slip-up that he made to nail him. But he literally had this case, I think, in the bag up until yesterday. But I do think things changed. Now, you still feel like a lot of, like, explain a little bit about these calls and everything. You explain, like, you know, we know under duress, right? We all heard, you know, the allegations of under duress, not in the right state of mind. What else, Magnolia? Like, if you were a jury or you're thinking about this case like yourself and analyzing this and analyzing the phone calls, do you not see confessions? What do you see out of these phone calls?
Well, going back to the calls from November 2022, what we were talking about before, Kathy Allen, he told her that if things became too difficult for her, that he would tell detectives whatever they want to hear. On November 14th, he made a very emotional call where he was crying and saying things like, I'm sorry, I know what you told me, I believe you, I wish I could see you one last time, I'll see you in the next life, you take care of the family for me. So that's what he told Kathy. I'll see you in the next life.
Does that mean he's going to do self-harm to himself and is apologizing for putting his wife in this position?
Yeah, I mean, this was really not that long into his incarceration.
Less than a month.
I looked it up a minute ago, and Brad Rozzi and Andrew Baldwin were his attorneys by December 1st, 2022. So they joined the case sometime in November 2022. Just to answer your question, because they were putting out public statements by December 1st of that year.
Okay,
talking about the upcoming hearing that would take place in January.
One thing I noticed about the revealing of these calls thus far is a batch of calls went through to him and his wife that they're playing in the court in November. And then it seems like there has been a gap between November and April, around beginning of April. And then these calls started. So I'm just wondering, maybe Baldwin and Rozzi, when they were finally on board with him in December, tried their best to tell him to stay off the phone.
Yeah. So that could be there, because it is noticeable. It seems like all the reports that people are putting out from the courtroom, it seems like we heard a batch of calls from November and then not again until April, because that's where they pick up again. And so in calls, Luke Nicholas posted that in calls from April 2nd, 2023, Allen discusses finding faith and accepting Jesus Christ as his Savior. His mother, he told his mother this on the phone. She reacted positively, saying that he's been sparing my life for a reason all these years. So he's saying that he found God, he gave his life to Christ, and this is as of April 2nd. So that was what was happening the very, very beginning of April. Now, the thing I said earlier about the defense, they're objecting because apparently in at least one of the calls, he's saying that he's innocent. So let's see, there's a call where Alan says he's innocent and describes being mentally tortured and, quote, killed at the Westville Correctional Unit.
When he make that call?
The notes on that are not dated. But Rozzi is saying that the defense or the state is omitting evidence in an attempt to represent facts to the jury outside of context. And McClelland claims that the calls are complete on their own and they don't need to add these other calls in. But the defense is saying either you play them all or you play none. So, it's hard to say. So apparently in some calls, he's saying, I killed Libby and Abby. But then in other calls, he's saying, I didn't do it. Now, I have let me find this. I have some more details about the tapes. So there were 7 audio tapes from inside the correctional facility. So from inside Westville. These are calls with Richard Allen talking to his wife in April, May, and June of 2023. There were several admissions of guilt, but Allen provided no details. April 13th, 2023, Richard Allen said, I killed Abby and Libby. Kathy Allen replied, no, you didn't. Richard said, I think I did. Kathy said, they are messing with your mind. Richard said, I think I did. I don't know. I wish they would kill me and let me apologize to the families. May 10th, 2023, Richard says, I think maybe I lost my mind. I need you to know I did this. Kathy says, you are not well. Richard says, I'm having to spend the rest of my life here. If I get the electric chair, will you be there for me? June 11th, 2023, Richard Allen said, I did it. Do you still love me? Kathy says, yes, dear, but you didn't do it. You can't call me and talk like this. Richard said, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I lost my mind. I feel like I'm already in hell. And then they note again that Kathy Allen was quietly sobbing at some points throughout the tapes because I guess it was kind of emotional to listen to.
All right, so my take.
So what do you think about those?
Well, I think here's where my mind is thinking. You got a first batch of phone calls that they talking about in November, right? Beginning of November, but none of those phone calls really were confessions. They were just like, I want to talk to authorities. I'll talk to them. But nothing about a confession. So,
well, just saying that he would tell them whatever they wanted to hear.
Okay, no confession though. So, you got those phone calls in November. Then his attorneys get appointed at the beginning of December. So far in this trial, I heard nothing about any type of confessions or phone calls or anything. December, January, February, maybe at the end of March, but towards April. So in the springtime, you hear nothing. Nothing about nothing. Then it seems like April, things are all coming out. From confessing to guards, to jailhouse confessions, to on tape, to the psychologist. All this stuff starting in April, right? After he claims he found God. April, May, and June, it seems like there's a lot of this, he's saying this stuff and this stuff. Now, remember when you and I went to that hearing in 2023? Didn't we go in June? When was that hearing? In June of 2023?
Yeah, June 15th.
But during the course of this trial, thus far, we've heard nothing else, nothing at all about past June of 2023 of any confessions whatsoever. July, August, September, October, November, all the way up to today. So maybe at that point in June, when it got revealed, because we heard it in court about, McClellan dropped that bombshell in court that he confessed in prison to his wife and someone else. I think it was his mom, right? And people's jaw dropped. When we were in court, we heard it. I actually went out and started tweeting about it, and people were calling me a liar. And I'm like, dude, I'm in court. I heard it. I heard it, right? But what I'm saying is from June, when it got revealed that he did all this, possibly at that point, I think Baldwin and Rozzi really reined him in and prohibited him from saying anything to anyone about the case, because we're not hearing anything about confessions that people have testified July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, all the way into 2024. Nothing. It's all in that April, May, June 3-month span, correct?
It's because though that is the specific time period of his mental breakdown. Where we are zeroed in on this very specific period of time. And that's why the confessions happened during that time. So the overall timeline is he was arrested October 26th. He said he was going to get an attorney, but then realized he couldn't afford it. So sometime in November, Baldwin and Rozzi were appointed as his attorneys. They began right away looking into the case. The PCA, or the affidavit for the search warrant, was released. They're collecting this information. They're preparing for the hearing on January 13th, 2023. So throughout November and December, they were preparing for that hearing. The hearing happened, and then that was mid-January. And then from that point, they're trying to get discovery. During February, they were expecting to get discovery. They kept asking for discovery. They were going back and forth. And then they eventually started receiving stuff, I think around like in March or so. And then Richard Allen is said to have received the discovery those first couple days in April. At the same time, he's saying, I found God. And right away, there is a marked change in him. It seems like once he saw the discovery, because that was the point in time when Dr. Monica Walla began documenting his mental decline, starting April 3rd, April 4th, somewhere in that range. And so that's when he began saying these things like, I want to confess, or I'm ready to confess, or, but most of the time what it sounds like in the entire pile of confessions, out of all 60 of them, it seems as if there's really only one that included any type of details about the crime, and it was the one he told verbally to his psychologist. And it wasn't recorded, or
and that was the May
like
one, so, May of 2023.
So that account of his confession to her, the one that included some details, was told to her that she took notes and put into her digital files, and then now years later has testified this is what he said. But it sounds like all the calls where they're saying he confessed in all these different calls, it sounds like it's a lot of the same thing, just repetitive over and over. He's telling Kathy, I did this, and Kathy's like, no, you didn't. And he's like, well, maybe I did, or I don't know if I did, or I think I did. I think I'm losing my mind, but I killed Libby and Abby. And so it sounds like it was just like a whole lot of that just on repeat on a lot of these calls. That's kind of what we're hearing from the testimony. So it's hard to say, but then at the same time, the defense is claiming that there are calls where he specifically says he's innocent. and that he's being tortured and he's afraid they're going to kill him. So that's important too. So you have to, and that's what they're saying. They're like, if you want to play these calls, play all the calls, not just the ones where he said, I think I killed them, or I did it, or, play all the calls. Let's hear the whole picture. And so we get an idea of his frame of mind and what was actually going on with him. So, they'll be able to kind of exploit that when it's their turn to present, and they'll be like, well, you heard these phone calls from Richard Allen and his wife, but you didn't hear the calls where he said he was innocent, and we're going to play those calls now, So that'll have an effect on the jury, because they'll be like, well, why didn't the prosecution play this call too? Why would they play all these other ones but not this one? So it's going to help, I think, for them to nitpick the confessions and try to dismantle the confessions, because that's going to be a big part of their case.
I have a little different take. And my mind start thinking, okay, so originally Richard Allen denies it to authorities, right? Interrogated twice. They arrest him. All of us, including him and even his attorneys, acknowledged, for a while he was kept in the dark of what's going on. I mean, they pretty much took him from Carroll County, I believe, to White County, right? Another county, and then eventually to Westville, to the maximum security prison. And his lawyers for a while weren't getting any access to him. And I think they were trying to say that the state didn't even provide anything about his case for that first month or so, right? So maybe he's thinking in his mind he got away with it or something, or they don't got nothing on me. They don't got nothing on me. And he's sitting there maybe for months and months and months incarcerated, thinking the state don't have them because he doesn't have access. He hasn't been provided anything. But then that discovery comes. And he maybe starts reading that discovery. He's like, oh, crap. I'm cooked. God, please forgive me for what I've done. I'm sorry. And find God, because he knows he's done. So he starts confessing to God, and praying for his sins or whatever like that. And then he's like, oh, crap. And maybe he had to start to play the crazy role. I'm just thinking, I'm putting myself in different scenarios here. Maybe he starts playing the crazy role and acting like he's crazy. And starts acting bizarre and delusional. And those 3 months, we got where he was. But at the same time, seeing him in person, I don't know if he was faking it. Because he looked messed up.
Yeah, and, for him, it's really hard for me to imagine it's hard. It's just hard for me to believe that Richard Allen, this guy that we've been talking about for years, is capable of, out of nowhere one day, just deciding, I'm going to go to the trails, I'm going to kidnap these girls, I'm going to sexually assault them,
a six-pack of beer,
I'm going to do these things, and go down the hill and do all this stuff, and then leave the scene without leaving a trace. Like, that's crazy. He didn't leave a trace of anything. He goes home. He calls the police a couple of days later and says, hey, I was on the bridge. Let me know if I can help, whatever. He does an interview with the police officer. They mark it down, cleared, good to go. And then he goes about his life for 5.5 years. And then all of a sudden he's arrested, or they start coming after him. And then he finds himself in the interrogation where he's denying everything. And then suddenly he's arrested. And then fast forward several months, now all of a sudden he gets his discovery and he decides he's going to pretend to be insane, and he's going to go to all these links and pretend he's insane, and he's going to bang his head on the wall and flush paper in the toilet,
eat poop,
feces,
drink toilet water,
all these things, and he's gonna pretend like he's crazy, and then he's gonna get on the phone and say confessions while he's crazy, and then all of a sudden June rolls around and he's fine, and we just
I get it, Magnolia.
Say Richard Allen. So you have to basically believe, in order to buy the prosecution's theory. Here's what I'm saying: in order to buy their theory, from top to bottom, start to finish. You have to believe that Richard Allen is some sort of genius, mastermind. That's what you have to believe. That he was capable of not only pulling off this crime and leaving no evidence, but he's also capable of pretending to be insane to the point that everyone believes he's insane. And at the same time, it's a lot. It's a
Magnolia,
lot to process.
I 100% agree
okay,
with you, Magnolia.
Did all these things.
Magnolia, I 100%. Listen, I'm playing devil's advocate here, dude. There's so much stuff. You're right. I mean, he kept his gun and kept his car. He called in the tip and put himself there. He called in. I get it. There's a lot of things like that don't make sense to me. I'm trying to figure out, and I'm trying to, put in a perspective on a guilty approach on him. Like, I'm just trying to, figure out both sides here and try to figure this out because a lot of it does not make sense. A lot of it, but I'm just trying to think, chain of events and behaviors. Was he feigning illness? Because we're not there. We can't see. We're only going by, what these people claim, he was acting like in prison. But, we all weren't there. If we were all there, we would all maybe be able to see and determine if we were around Allen, whether the cameras are on him or not, to determine whether he's faking or not. I could probably pick it out.
Yeah.
But we're not there. We have to rely on what these people. Are these people credible? But then you get into crazy stuff like Dr. Walla, going around all the forums and everything like that. And knowing stuff about the case. I think that's not ethical. I don't think she should have been able to testify because she's too entrenched in this by going outside the scope of her job to, find information about this case. And could he use that against Richard Allen?
Well, yeah, it really undermines the credibility of him, of his confession totally, because now we know he did have the discovery before the quote-unquote detailed confession, but we also know that he was having daily conversations with Monica Walla about all the internet forums that she was on, and she was telling him all the gossip, all the things people were saying about the case. And so not only was he exposed to the discovery in the case, but it was augmented with more information from Monica Walla, stuff that she collected online, and then probably whatever, when she went in and looked in the database at the case and she's trying to see all this stuff, she had as much knowledge on this case as a police officer investigating the case would have, because she had access and exploited her access in order to look at all the evidence. And so she would have seen, all the different witness statements, even the Brad Weber stuff, since he was a person of interest at one time. So it's just hard to put credibility on this quote-unquote detailed confession for me because of all those reasons. But then also it's a false confession because he says he did something with his gun on the bridge, and that might be how the bullet fell on the ground. And then he told the girls to go down the hill. That's the sequence of events in her telling of it yesterday, and that's not accurate.
It's not accurate. So, you're right. It's not accurate because the bridge is way farther away than the crime scene.
That's a big mess up. That bullet wasn't on the bridge, so it can't possibly have happened the way that she said it did, right? So. And then the one detail, everyone's clinging to this one detail about the van and Brad Rousey, like, well, only the killer would know. Brad Weber, and only the killer would know the van. And I don't think so. I don't think only the killer would know the van 5-6 years into it. Because by the time he says this about seeing a van, That was April 2023. 6 years had passed. 6 years of internet forums, 6 years of locals putting every last detail they know on the internet. Everybody sharing pictures of the properties and the Google images and the white van and the Google. I mean, so I'm not impressed by that detail about the van. And then I also think this sequence of events is not possible, because if that's what happened, then how did the bullet get to the crime scene?
Unless he just botched, unless she interpreted that confession wrong, wrote it down wrong, got it a little messed up, or he said it a little messed up, or...
Well, that would be a pretty big mistake on her part. That would be a pretty big mistake on her part, but that's possible because it was not recorded. She was making notes based on what he told her verbally. So it's not as if we can go back and see what it was he actually said. We don't know what he actually said. We have no clue what he actually said.
We have to rely on Monica Walla.
We only know what Monica's notes
Monica
said.
Walla. Walla.
Now, if she made a mistake...
Walla, Washington. Walla. Walla.
Yeah, so Brad said 2 bullets ejected. Right, so now do we have 2 bullets? So now was there a bullet on the bridge too that no one ever found? I mean, what's going on with these bullets falling all over the ground? You know,
Walla's like, voila, I'm going to be the smoking gun in this case. Voila, I'm going to testify. You know how we get the truth out of this? The whole truth. You know, put the victim's family alone with Richard Allen in a cell. I'm sure we'll get the truth. You can't do that. I'm just saying. You know what I mean? Put the victim's family alone in a cell with Richard Allen. We should get the truth out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll be able to determine whether this guy's lying or whether he did the crime or didn't do the crime. Yeah. Put the victim's family alone with the suspect. I would go as far as saying waterboard, but some people don't like that concept.
Well, he was, I mean, as far as what we understand, he more or less, he was under some form of torture.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, solitary confinement, this sets precedent, by the way, in Indiana, unless they stop the practice. You're supposed to, there's rules, laws, and regulations, and apparently you have to, somebody can only spend like 30 days in solitary confinement, and then you're up for a review, and then they can extend it, but there's a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that have been in solitary confinement for decades around this country. Convicted criminals. There was a guy named Thomas Silverstein. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him. He was the longest person to ever spend in solitary confinement. He spent like 30-something years in solitary confinement in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He died a couple years ago. But, there's people that spend decades in solitary confinement. I spent 26 straight months in solitary confinement. 26 straight months. I could go around platforms all day and talk about my own experience in solitary confinement. I got mounds and mounds of evidence, documents. Remember I told you I got to go to my mother's house and get all those notes and all that. Like I got duffel bags. Literally, when I walked out the Federal Bureau of Prisons, I had duffel bags of paperwork. I was just being it was wild. I could tell you like stories. Like the only way I got that sanity was put a towel around my head and pace back and forth in the cell listening to a little radio.
Mm-hmm.
And just
you had a radio?
Well, yeah, I had a radio. I was in when I was in solitary the 26 months. I was in Lexington, Kentucky. There's some good radio stations. They had sports. I was listening to ESPN Sports Radio AM. I was listening to Michael Savage Nation. I was listening to George Norrie, Coast to Coast, on the AM at nighttime.
Nice.
And then, they had some hip-hop radio stations. They had a country music station, and I had music, but, it was a routine. It was a routine. You sit in your cell. There was a couple people. The one thing I got good when I was in solitary, the only thing I was good to go, because I used to play handball with a couple of the Mexicans that were in solitary too. So, you can go to a rec cage, and they got a little rec cage, and they got a wall. It's surrounded by wall. You can go inside or outside. Outside, you see sunlight, but you just have a wall around you. But there was a couple Mexicans across the hall from me that we would agree. You have to agree with it. You know, you have to be cool, and they'll put you in a little room with a Mexican, and we would play handball. So we play handball. Whoever loses the match would have to do 50 push-ups and stuff like that, and that would be the rec. That would be the rec every day. So, you know, you do go out 5 days a week for rec. You're in your cell. Other than that, the only time you come out is for medical visits or emergencies if you have to go to court or whatever like that. But you're in a cell. You know, you get fed at like breakfast time at like 6 a.m. do a food slot. As soon as that was done, you could either go back to sleep. I think I was just doing some push-ups. Lunch is at like 11. Dinner's at 4. That's it. You know, and, you know, during the course of the day, you might have some people from the administration that walk down the catwalk and look in your cell and ask you, you okay? You might have a counselor that comes by, whoever. You know, a lot of times I just put the towel on my head and just put the Walkman and just pace back and forth and just zone myself out. But other people handle it differently. I heard people all day banging their heads on the walls, screaming and yelling. Yeah, I've seen people get cell extracted. I've been cell extracted. You know, people plugging up their vents, people acting out, flooding their sinks, flooding their toilets. It's wild stuff, but I mean, and it will make, I'm telling you, it will make anyone go crazy. Just being a couple days subjected to that will make anybody go crazy and lose their mind. Especially when you're told you can't get out.
Yeah.
You know, being in prison is one thing, but at least in prison, you got a little bit of freedom. Or, you know, you have units. You can walk around the units. You got rec yard. You know, you go out there rec yard. You walk around. The Federal Bureau of Prisons got Unicorp. Go out there work. You can go to the chapel. You can go to the music. You can go to the chow hall. Walk to the chow. You can walk around. You walk around. It's a big giant compound. You walk around. Control movements. Sometimes control movements, some not. But you walk around. But imagine being in the maximum security of a maximum security prison. It's a dungeon. You got condensation on the walls, pumping cold air. You have a little tiny window. It's frosted and stuff. And you got people screaming, in the vent all day. Plus, you're on a block. You got a wing. You probably got about 20 people on the block. And you're seeing people come and go. Like some people being there for a couple days. So imagine like Richard Allen or myself be sitting there in a cell and seeing people leave solitary confinement after a day or two. And you're stuck there.
Yeah.
You can't go nowhere.
Okay, so
starts messing with your mind. Things start messing with your mind. So I can understand the concept. That's why I personally think these confessions in that particular environment to me is null and voided. It's a lot different than just confessing on a jailhouse block to a bunch of people that you did the crime, or a psychologist, just in general population. Because in general population, you're not tortured. It's bad, but you're not tortured. Solitary is a whole different animal. It is. And I hope for Richard Allen's sake, his defense attorneys hones in on that. Hones in about the environment. They should put graphs and charts, and they should do studies, and they should share, and they probably will. They probably will.
Yeah. It's a massive, massive part of their case because, like we've seen, the prosecution's presentation of the confessions is their biggest piece of their case. So it's going to be focused on extensively by the defense. And we know they're going to call back Monica Walla to the stand. So some people, I want to point out one thing that I've heard a lot since yesterday. It seems that Monica Walla's testimony yesterday may be a little different than what she testified to previously in pre-trial hearings. So that'll be interesting to see when it's time for the defense because what they're going to do, they're going to take her testimonies, because I know she testified July 2023, and she was fired after that testimony because some of the stuff they didn't like what she said, and then also I guess it came out about her accessing this database she wasn't supposed to be accessing to get information, and she's leaking all this stuff. But prior to her being fired and all that, she did testify in July 2023, and it seems as though her testimony that day differs from some of the things she said yesterday.
Like what?
So I don't know any specifics. have heard people say that her testimony yesterday was different than what she had previously said.
Because in July 2023, it's just a couple months.
I think specifically to do with whether or not she thought he was faking. The reason I say I think that's what it's about is because I've seen some transcripts and I've seen a lot of her notes. And we actually went over a bunch of those a couple weeks ago when we first started covering this trial. Sometime last week we went over and I read through her notes. And based on the notes that I read from her previous testimony, she clearly believed that he was in severe mental health decline. It was not ambiguous whatsoever. She consistently wrote in her notes that he was declining by the day. He had a grave mental illness, using words like that. And so they'll take that testimony from July 2023. They'll confront her with any inconsistencies that they find, and she'll get grilled on the stand. So that'll be what they do to kind of point out certain inconsistencies. They will 100% try to completely demolish her credibility by bringing up all the social media stuff and the leaks and all the things she did. So that'll be good. That'll be interesting to see when that gets hashed out. But I have some more updates. Max Lewis.
Send me the tweet so I can show it while you explain.
He's my favorite one. He's from Fox 59. I think his updates are very, very good. He usually captures some details that other people miss. So he put out, just a few minutes ago, he put out his lunchtime update. So we'll go through this and see if there's anything else that we missed before.
Here we go.
So he says they started out the morning playing the phone calls that Richard Allen made to his family. Master Trooper Brian Harshman testified that he listened to more than 700 calls. In a call on November 14th, he made a typo here.
Yeah, typo, 2022. Max, do better, Max.
So in a call on November 14th, 2022 with his wife, Allen said to his wife that if it ever became too much for her, then he'll call the detectives and tell them whatever they want to know. Allen's wife was in the courtroom and began crying and put her head down. Next was a call to his mom on April 2nd, 2023, where he speaks about finding God. Then a call with his wife, April 3rd, played where he said, I killed Abby and Libby. His wife says, no, you didn't. And he says, yes, I did. His wife asked why he would say that. And he said, because maybe I did. And then he also said, I wish they would kill me or let me apologize to the families at least. Then came a call from May 10th. Allen told his wife, I think I'm losing my mind. I need you to know I did this. I'm definitely losing my mind now. He told his wife, I had a dream that I needed to let you go. During a call later that day, Allen begins to say, if I get the electric chair, and his wife interrupts him and says, no. During a June 5th call, he says, again, I feel like I've lost my mind. He says, you know, I done it, right? On June 11th, he said, I did it. And again says, I feel like I lost my mind. Probably going to have to kill myself now. Harshman said he believes Richard Allen's voice is the same as the bridge guy. Harshman was then asked about the van reference Allen made in a session with his psychologist. And he's referring to yesterday's testimony from Dr. Walla. Harshman said that he did see Dr. Walla's report until this past, he didn't see, I think that's supposed to say he didn't see Dr. Walla's report until this past August. He found out Brad Weber owned a van and spoke with Weber. Harshman believes Weber was driving up his driveway around 2:30 that afternoon, which would match with the confession. Harshman said Weber's van wasn't mentioned in previous reports. During cross, Brad Rossi said that van was mentioned hundreds of times
Ooh, in
the discovery that Allen received. Rossi asked if Harshman believed Weber was credible, and he said yes. Defense indicated yesterday that they might have evidence to contradict Weber's story.
Dun, dun, dun.
Rossi brought up that Allen was psychotic when making those statements and also received Haldol shots. He suggested that Haldol would have affected his speech. He also pointed out that Harshman has no training in psychology or speech patterns. Okay, so Brad Rossi is saying that by listening to the calls,
he was able to determine that
Harshman, he's kind of questioning, well, how were you able to match that voice? Because on the calls, he would have been under the influence of Haldol, and therefore the voice might not actually be the same. I think what he's getting at. Rossi also asked about problems with Allen's specific confession, such as the bullet falling out of the gun before the girls were taken down the hill. Rossi pointed out that Harshman was essentially surveying Allen all the time. Rossi tried to bring up a call Allen made earlier in the day on April 3rd, where he proclaimed his innocence and said he felt like he was in Guantanamo Bay.
Gitmo!
But Cleveland objected, and they had a sidebar, broke for lunch, and then it'll be redirect when they come back from lunch. So, so that was what we talked about earlier. First thing this morning, the defense objected to the calls because they said they omitted calls where he said he's innocent. And so I guess he tried to sneak that in on the cross.
So they admitted that. So basically is that van was mentioned in the discovery.
Hundreds of times.
Which Allen received before saying the things to Walla.
Yeah. So there you go.
Interesting.
So guess who else would have known about the van? Number one super fan of Delphi, Monica Walla.
Interesting. So interesting. Again. But you notice, like, it's so weird because it started in November of him speaking, and then there's just nothing. We don't hear any type of behavior or anything from him or by him.
Yeah, because that's
in January, February, or March. It all starts in April.
Well, that's why I pointed out the timeline of his arrest when he got his attorneys. They were spending time between November and January preparing for their hearing. But that was probably the main focus, and so he was probably focused on preparing for his hearing. And then they had the hearing, the one where you yelled at him, and then he goes back, and at that point, that was when they were really pushing and trying to get discovery. And so you know how that goes. It's lots of back and forth, trying to get discovery, asking for things. And then they get the discovery, and then all of a sudden, Richard Allen has a complete and total breakdown.
But here's the thing is, he's talking about 700 calls. But in the course of what's being said, and we're hearing that's put out of the record, it's only dealing with a few incidents of these calls. A few of them. A few in April, one in June 11th, the beginning of April, and a couple of those calls in November. Well, where are the other hundreds and hundreds of calls? And what was said in those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other calls?
Yeah.
Was those hundreds of other calls happen in the springtime that they were just having conversations that, they were just talking on the phone? Because my mind also thinks that maybe possibly the Indiana Department of Corrections weaponized the phone with Richard Allen, where they restricted access to him for an extended period of time where he couldn't call his family. And then finally, in April, the beginning of April, they say, fine, you can call your family now. And give him access to the phone, which he didn't have prior. Back in November, I don't know when exactly he came to Westville. When exactly did he come to Westville? Like, what's the date?
Oh, he was in Westville in November, like very quickly.
So when those
the safekeeping order was done by Judge Steiner. Remember, one detail we never really mentioned is that this case actually started out with a different judge, Judge Steiner, and he's the one who put the safekeeping order in place pretty much right away. I mean,
Steiner was,
because they did the arrest, and then immediately Nick McClellan filed to seal everything. Nick McClellan wanted everything sealed, even the probable cause affidavit. He wanted all of those things sealed, and that's when the gag order was issued and the safekeeping order was issued. But then Judge Steiner recused himself, and all of this happened very quickly after the arrest. So he was already in Westville as of November 2022.
What I was saying is, so I'm assuming those phone calls that he made with his wife in November happened when he was in Westville.
Yeah.
But we don't hear anything about any other phone calls or whatever through the springtime. Nothing. No one has said anything about January, February, or March. I'm just wondering if he had his phone restricted, because at one point too, it's been revealed that he was tased while he was in his cell.
Yeah.
So the reason why I say that, in order to get tased, you got to do something really. I mean, they could tase you for whatever. What I'm saying is, if they end up tasing you in your cell, there's chances are that you're going to get some restrictions, and one of those restrictions would be you can't use the phone, can't get commissary, you can't have visits. You're going to get written up.
Right.
You're going to get written up. So when exactly was he tased? And was there a point where he couldn't use his phone, and then finally, and maybe in the beginning of April, he got phone privileges, and he started utilizing those phone privileges?
Yeah, I think that could be an explanation as to why there's a gap in time.
Yeah.
Other than just Baldwin and Rozzi saying don't make any calls once they came on board, because it seems as though the calls stopped around November 14th when he says he wants to die, or whatever it was he said, and then we didn't hear any more calls until April. So it could have been a combination of things. It could have been the attorneys telling him, don't talk on the phone, don't talk about your case to anyone, and maybe he listened to them. But then also it's possible that he had his phone privileges revoked, so he wouldn't have had access. But just think about this. Think about being his attorneys, Baldwin and Rozzi, you come on this case. It's a massive case. They're going to try to defend him the best they can. Just imagine what their reaction must have been when they found out that he was saying these things to his wife on the phone. Yeah. Just imagine how livid they must have been.
They're probably mad. They're like, either they set him up or just mad at him for getting on that phone, or what in the world? Because these attorneys have clients, and then these attorneys have their the inmates, whatever like that, and some of the inmates make bonehead stuff while represented, and the attorney has to try to damage control the situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was a defense attorney and my client did that, I would lose my mind. I would be ballistic. But at the same time, I think they recognized that he was having mental breakdowns, because that's what practically the whole hearing was about come June. By the time we got to June,
the conditions of confinement.
They were filing all these motions. They were complaining about the conditions, his mental breakdown.
They were complaining about access to him. They were like, yo, we got to travel like hours to get there, and then go through this security procedure and go through all these metal detectors and all kinds of weird stuff to eventually get to a client. By then, it's the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
They were just like, it was a long time getting access to him. It's just the whole process. And didn't they say they had to go to the jail or go to the prison, go through the attorney visiting room or whatever, and then they have to get in a shuttle or a bus and go to another unit where he's housed at, like in a bus or a van or something?
Yeah, and they said they also were not allowed to take their phones in when they went to visit him.
And then only
and
to
then
be
they
put.
were under surveillance.
Remember, they also said like they were in a cafeteria and they, you know, Richard Allen wanted some water and they wouldn't even let him drink water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, they had been experiencing their own difficulties by then with even being able to visit Richard Allen. They were very frustrated by that. We heard them testify to it in the hearing, about what a burden it was for them to have to travel so far in the first place when they wanted him moved to a county jail that would be better for them to be able to travel to. And then also they felt that would solve the issue of how he was being treated at Westville. So, you know, they were experiencing their own frustrations at the time, and I'm sure finding out that Richard Allen had said these things on these calls, I'm sure they were really not happy about that. But, you know, the other thing that I've thought about over time when those confessions happened, it seems as though, from my perspective, after the confessions happened, and we're talking in June 2023, by that point, it seemed as if that his defense attorney's belief in his innocence went off the charts after the confessions.
Interesting.
Because instead of the opposite, instead of it being like,
oh man,
well, maybe he really did do this and maybe we should try to get him a deal, or maybe we should try to get him to work with the state and, you know, something along those lines. Instead of doing that, they literally kicked everything up like 10 notches and they went full throttle protesting his innocence after the confession. So I always think about that. Like, it's interesting because,
or maybe they just thought gloves are off because of what they've done to him, putting them thing. They're like, F the system. We're going all ham.
Yeah, I just think if I'm putting myself in their shoes and I'm a defense attorney for a client who's accused of murder, and all of a sudden they're confessing on the phone to their wife, I might think to myself, well, that's going to be pretty hard to beat. That's going to be hard to overcome in court. That's really going to hurt our chances at trial. Mr. Allen, maybe we should talk about making a plea deal, Mr. Allen. I think that's what a lot of attorneys would do, but that's not what they did. They did the opposite, and they went
They did the Frank's motion. They did the motion.
Innocent. Well, because then over the summer, sometime in that time frame is when they started getting this information from the original detectives, Todd Click, one of these detectives that were originally investigating Brad Holder and his crew. In the summer last year, wrote these memos to the defense saying, this is what we were investigating. This is what we believed. This was our theory. And they started reaching out to the defense because they were alarmed. They couldn't believe that this random guy, Richard Allen, had been arrested when they had all this evidence on other suspects. And so they reached out to the defense. They wrote these letters, and those letters were part of the Frank's motion of the third party culprits. And then the next thing you know, just like all hell broke loose. And that was when, once that Frank's motion came out, just they immediately sealed it. But some of us saved it. And then from that point, everything just went crazy, just crazy town. And that got filed in September 2023. And by October 31st, the defense attorneys were kicked off the case.
Yeah. Interesting.
Just so
well, it's
happened.
because
And,
it might, you know,
like,
always people said the Fran Gull was like, you're not going with the program. You know, people were like,
well,
you know.
she's mad because she didn't like that. The Frank's motion really, really pissed her off because they immediately, they filed it publicly so people were able to see it. And immediately she sealed it within hours. It was all in the same day that happened. The Franks motion came out in the morning, and by early afternoon or so, it was gone. It was completely sealed. She was not happy by that. And then the next thing you know, there's like a leak of evidence, and so she throws them off the case. Now, here's the other question. Here's another thing, just to go along with what I said before. So just imagine now, Monon and Rozzy have been on this case for a year, and they get kicked off. Now, if they thought that he did this, wouldn't they at that point almost be like relieved, like, oh, let somebody else deal with this guy? You know, thank God we don't have to deal with this killer anymore, you know, and then go about their life and go work on other cases and do other things. That's not what they did. They fought tooth and nail to come back and be his attorneys again. They took it all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court in order to be able to come back. And they did. They won. They came back. And so if you thought he was guilty, would you go through all that? Would you put yourself through all the things that they put themselves through over the last year? I don't know. I don't know if I would.
And risk getting disbarred?
Well, I know that, yeah, because she threatened them. Fran Gull threatened them. She threatened to admonish them publicly in court if they refused. So what's interesting, that day was the only time Fran Gull ever granted cameras in the courtroom, and she had it all set up and ready to go. Her plan was to bring them into court and admonish them publicly on camera for the evidence leak. And so she threatened them, if you don't resign, this is what I'm going to do to you.
A public humiliation court hearing where you're going to be all over the, where I get to have my way with you in front of national TV.
Yeah. And it's just funny because that's the only time that she ever granted a request for cameras, because she thought she was going to have this big moment and ruin their lives. But they called her bluff, and they did step away, only to come back months later. So, everyone says, a good defense attorney puts up a vigorous defense. I feel like these guys have gone way above and beyond that. And so I consider that too in my thinking of like whether he's innocent or guilty. I consider all of that when I'm thinking about this case overall.
Yeah, well, case in point, they're still filing, and they're probably doing this for appellate reasons, right, to get this out there on the record and stuff. And yesterday they filed this new motion based off the testimony from Holman, right? They want Odenism back. They want the Odenism be able to get that on there as third-party suspects, and particularly Elvis Fields.
Yeah.
So this was the motion. Now, she didn't grant that or deny that at this time, correct? It's still pending, right?
Which one?
Yesterday's motion, the accused second motion to admit evidence of Odenism, Norse paganism, ritualistic killings, and also a motion to admit evidence concerning Elvis Fields and Brad Holder as third-party suspects. Now, is there a timeline? When will she rule on this?
Well, I think she's going to have to rule on it today, sometime today, because we expect the prosecution to rest today. So she's going to have to rule on it before the defense begins. So it's possible the defense could begin as early as tomorrow morning.
Quite possible. Though I didn't expect that trooper to be on the stand today, so this might be carried out longer. I something just tells me the defense is going to start Saturday. I have a feeling the prosecution is going to go through tomorrow at least. I just had that feeling. I feel like they're going to still try to present more things in reference to phone calls.
Well, I think the reason that they had him on the stand today is because he was part of the presentation of the phone calls, because he was able to testify that he personally listened to the phone calls. And so I think he was part of that presentation. Now, I don't know if they have anybody else they're going to call up. But yeah, so I guess they're at lunch right now. They'll be back soon, and we'll see if they rest today.
I want to show a little bit. First off, I appreciate the individual. I won't say the person's name, but they sent me this aerial drone shot of the courthouse. I think it's pretty cool. This is the side where the jury goes in, the two vans. You know, the jury goes into the side there. This is the side that's sealed off from the public. So I really, really appreciate that, the drone footage like that. I thought that was awesome. He also offered to do some drone footage for the bridge. This is really cool. I like this. This is really cool. It just shows you the courthouse, Carroll County Courthouse, biggest building in Delphi, it looks like. Pretty cool. But let's talk a little bit about Elvis Fields a little bit. Let's talk about, you know, out there a little bit. Tell us a little bit about Elvis Fields and the information out there that's on Elvis Field, Magnolia. I'm getting a picture of it.
Yeah, so Elvis is one of the original suspects in the case, primarily, I believe, because he implicated himself in the crimes. He actually confessed to being there when the girls were killed. He told his sister that. He had two sisters. He told both sisters that. And this was early on. This was way, way back in the beginning. He claims that he spit on one of the girls' bodies. He claims that Libby was really mouthy, that she had a lot to say. What else? He said to a police officer, if my saliva shows up on one of the girls' bodies and I can explain it, am I still in trouble? So he's saying
where
things
is
like
this?
that.
Is this the creek?
To investigators. Where's what?
Yeah, this is a picture of Elvis Fields. Is this the Deer Creek? Is this the creek, like in that area, Delphi? Because this picture circulating of Elvis Field at a creek bed.
Yeah, I don't know where that was taken.
Yeah, so they're basically saying this individual here, he put out a tweet basically talking about Elvis Field. The reason why we're bringing him up because the defense is trying to get him in there, to, you know, him and Holder
as third-party suspects. But it says here, Elvis Fields also told his sister Mary that he was in fact involved in the Delphi crime, and he had just joined a brotherhood. Very normal and stuff that should be ignored over an unspent shell cartridge with no evidence implicating Allen besides a forced confession. Yup. So, yeah, this Fields, Bradley Holder Fields, and who's the other person? But they didn't name the other person, the third person. Who was the third person?
Yeah, Patrick Westfall is the third one. So the screenshot in that tweet that was included, I mean, their tweet, they were being sarcastic.
Yeah, of course.
Sort of takes away from the message. But the screenshot that they showed, this is part of the Frank's motion. So Unified Command was aware Elvis Fields confessed to his sister that he was involved in the murders, even providing to his sister intimate crime scene details of which only those present at the crime scene would have familiarity. Additionally, Elvis Fields told his sister, Mary, on February 14th. So he was telling her this stuff, by the way, before the girls' bodies were found. He told her on February 14th he was present at the killings and that he now had a brother and was now part of a gang. He's talking about the Odinists. In February 2018, Elvis had been questioned by law enforcement but denied involvement in the murders. However, after being dropped off at his trailer following the questioning, Elvis turned around, walked back to the police car, and according to the police report, asked the state trooper if his spit is found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away, would he still be in trouble?
Who
The state trooper that heard Elvis utter these words, Kevin Murphy, was not part of the Unified Command, but immediately relayed Elvis's disturbing question to Jay Harper of Unified Command. Elvis also admitted to a different sister, Joyce, that he had in fact spit on one of the girls. Elvis told Joyce that he was on a trail and a bridge with two girls that were killed and that he was going away for a long time.
This is crazy, Magnolia, because, I mean, we've talked about Elvis Fields before.
But the point is, like the prosecution saying with Richard Allen, oh, he's saying things only the killer would know. But it seems like Elvis Fields is also saying things to family members only the killer would know. Which he's admitting that
bodies were found.
before the bodies were found. This is who the defense wants to bring in, to let the jury hear about this potential guy as a suspect.
Well, because he was a suspect. And so that's what they're trying to get entered into evidence. Because a lot of people don't realize there was a full-blown investigation for years into these guys. They were the suspects. Brad Holder was recognized as a suspect by the FBI task force. So, but people don't know that because it's been suppressed. Everything has been suppressed, and they don't want to have this entered into evidence. But the defense is arguing that this is important because they did have other suspects. And then all of a sudden, one of the detectives was murdered. He was ambushed and murdered by another corrections officer named Shane Meehan. And once he was murdered, that pretty much ended this investigation. And so the two surviving, Kevin Murphy and Todd Click, they're the ones who got in touch with the defense last year because they felt very disturbed by this sudden case against Richard Allen out of nowhere. And they were like, they were shocked when he was arrested because they're like, wait a minute, that has nothing to do with what we were investigating. So they felt very disturbed by this and compelled to reach out to the defense, and that's what they did. So that was pretty much the crux of the, that, and then also the defense said in the Franks motion, they were trying to get all of the evidence obtained in the search of Richard Allen's home. They wanted that thrown out because they felt that Tony Liggett did not include any of this information on other suspects when he applied for the search warrant. So they wanted all that stuff thrown out because they said Liggett concealed and falsified evidence in his search warrant affidavit. That's what it said in the motion. So there were three parts of it: the crime scene, the evidence that connects the Odinist to the murders, Brad Holder's connection. They submitted a 12-page report on Odinism. They talked about Patrick Westfall's connection to the crime scene. There's another guy named Johnny Messer that was part of this, and Rod Abrams. So connections to Odinism, then the murders, Tony Liggett, concealed and falsified evidence. So those were the main aspects of the Franks motion. This motion was 158 pages, and it goes into great detail about Brad Holder, Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, Patrick Westfall, all these different people. Logan Holder, who was Abby's friend. So they go through all the stuff with Detective Greg Ferenczi, he's the one that was murdered, Kevin Murphy, and then Officer Todd Click. And they want Todd Click to testify. He's on the list for their witnesses.
So can the defense get Fields in there on a subpoena or no? Are they? If they can't get him in there can't they subpoena him?
Well, as it is now, none of that is allowed. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep introducing. They're trying to find a door in these different witnesses' testimonies. They're trying to see if there's a door or a way to get that in.
Maybe after Click's supposed to testify?
Yeah.
Maybe after Click says stuff on the record, then they can ask to have these individuals based off of former law enforcement saying it. What do you think?
Yeah, so it seems like Todd Click is on the witness list. Now, the suspects, the third-party suspects, are the ones that I don't think are allowed into this.
Oh, imagine them on the stand. You know, with their faces and names being put out there, imagine how they would react to the defense. It'd be like a battle show. They'd probably be yelling at one another. How dare you pin me on this? I didn't do it. Because, you know, when Holder made a Facebook post when his name was resurfaced again in that Frank's motion last year, correct? And he was just like, man, I can't believe I'm going through all this again. I didn't do this. Or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, he had some things to say. Yeah, last year when the Frank's motion came out.
Crazy. Anything else on these jailhouse things, Magnolia?
No, I think we got most of the info that's out right now from various people that were in the courtroom today. So yeah, so just to recap on the confession, so it seems as though we have 3 different categories of confessions. Number 1, things that he said to his suicide companions and the guards. Number 2, the calls with his wife and his mother. And number 3, what he said to his psychologist. So those are the confessions. That's what makes up all of the confessions. And a lot of the confessions were where he just told people things and then they wrote it down in their report. And then the recorded confessions came in the form of phone calls to his wife and his mother.
I'd like to hear people that's been in the courtroom give their honest take. Do they believe, based off those phone conversations, do they believe the voice of Bridge Guy is the same or not? I hope somebody in that courtroom comes out and gives their assessment on that.
Yeah, I'm interested too about that because we know that they did watch those interrogations the other day, so they would have heard Richard Allen speak. But I haven't heard anyone comment whether they thought the voice matched the Bridge video or not. I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, so I want people's take, even though everyone's we're not voice experts. No one's voice expert, so even it's just an opinion. But, I want to hear somebody that's, following this case, someone that's been in there every day, covering this case, and their honest assessment, whether they feel the voices on those recordings are the same as the voice that everyone heard down the hill. Down the hill.
Well, I think that this trial has turned into a real battle. I think it's a real back and forth battle at this point. I think in the first week and a half, it seemed like the prosecution was really floundering. And then all of a sudden this week, they came back a lot stronger with these confessions. And some of the things that have been testified have been definite points in their column for sure. So I think that now that they're about to rest and the defense is about to take their turn, I see a real battle here. I see a real back and forth battle. I think it's anyone's game at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this thing gets extended past the 15th. Reason being, today's the 31st. Prosecution went on for though you said if that a lot of the witnesses the defense is going to get cut down significantly. They went in the hundreds, it'd probably be cut down, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But you would think
especially if they're pertaining to the Odinist stuff, yeah.
But it's the 31st, right? They said that this thing's going to wrap up by the 15th, around the 15th. That's what they set it for, up to about the 15th.
Yes, November 15th.
Sure, they've been 14 days today, right? 14 days that the prosecution, starting tomorrow. Tomorrow will be 14 days, 2 weeks. So, will the defense go 2 weeks? Because if the defense goes 2 weeks, you're pushing it to the 15th.
Yeah, the 15th is 2 weeks from tomorrow. So, that means they will have... Now, that's just saying, like, let's just say they start their case tomorrow. And then they'll have Saturday... all of next week, including Saturday the 9th, and then the week of the 11th which starts with November 11th. Monday is Veterans Day, and then they have until the 15th. So now I don't know, like, is the 15th the day that they have to be done presenting their case by, or is the 15th the day we need to have a verdict reached?
Will be interesting, because based off the closing, based off the opening, I would say the closing, this closing arguments, statements by both parties, probably be half the day. It won't be that long for closing. Then it's the jury. I don't know. Juries. There's no really. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
I see a jury coming back within a day on this. I would assume, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the 15th is that like when they have to be complete with their closing arguments, and then the case gets turned over to the jury, or when are they supposed to turn this over to the jury in order for this to be done by the 15th? I don't know. It seems kind of arbitrary to set a specific end date, because it's hard to know. But maybe the defense doesn't really need all that much time, especially if they're not going to do any third-party stuff. They could spend the bulk of next week going back through some of these witnesses that they hope to be able to impeach, and then maybe that could be it.
Look at this weather. Talk about
weird weather. This is the weather for the next week. And we have 66, 36 low, and then 55, 32, and then 63, 44, 68. Look at the low, 62. And then it goes up to 71. And then it goes to 70, and then back down in the 50s. With rain. No, I'm just saying that because, this is Delphi weather. It's like warm one day, cold the next day. Warm one day, cold the next day. Plus, people have to wait outside in the rain. Look at that. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Rain, rain, rain. Horrible. Welcome to Indiana, people say.
Welcome to Indiana.
Brad Weber is coming back to the stand. So will Monica Walla. Trying to think, who else?
Would Ron Logan's wife come on the stand? Ex-wife?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that would be testimony to a third-party culprit, so probably not.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to know if they really think that Weber made stops, because if they could get proof, if Weber went on the stand and said he went directly home from Subaru, and then the defense can say that he stopped somewhere, or prove that he stopped somewhere, which it seems like they're going that angle. I mean, that's going to hurt him really bad.
Well, yeah, that'll just completely dismantle the whole theory, because the theory can't possibly work unless Brad Weber came home at 2:30. That's the only way this theory works, because that's the only thing that aligns with his confession to the psychologist, and therefore the theory that the prosecution has presented. Because it seems as if the prosecution built their theory based off this confession to the psychologist. It seems like they basically copied and pasted whatever it was he said the events were that day, except for the glaring mistake of the bullet. So that, their whole case is built on that confession. And so if it can be found or proven that Brad Weber did not come home at 2:30, then the entire thing falls apart. So that'll be interesting. So we'll have Brad Weber, Monica Walla, some other characters we expect to see are Keegan Kline, Tony Kline. Who else? I don't know. I wonder if they're going to call back any of those eyewitnesses. Like, imagine if they call Sarah Carbach.
What about CVS employees? Because, he's claiming that he stole the knife and put it behind the dumpster. What about CVS employees? What about his own wife?
Yeah, they may bring people up as, like, character witnesses or something like that. I can't imagine Kathy Allen taking the stand, but if they believe it would help their case, I think she would agree to it. But I have a hard time picturing her taking the stand for sure.
Yeah, wild stuff. All right, Magnolia, good job. We'll follow up on what happens today, especially with the confessions allegedly with his wife Kathy. We'll see what's said in court and keep people updated on this trial.
Yeah.
Thanks, Magnolia.
All right.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, we cover true crime 24/7, 365. What's up with these jailhouse prison phone calls? Legit or not legit? That is the question. And is the jury going to buy it or are they not going to buy it? Is Richard Allen innocent or guilty in your eyes? Let us know what you think and how this trial is going. It's a lot of unanswered questions here. Regardless of an outcome here, there's still so much to this case that just doesn't smell right. In my opinion, you might feel otherwise. It's a wild case, folks. JLR investigates. We will talk soon. Thanks for spending time with us this afternoon. We'll be back later on. And we're also covering other cases, of course. That's what we do on this channel. We might go back boots on the ground very, very soon. Where do we go? Where do we go? Give us some suggestions, ideas. What should we cover? What should we do? Election time coming around. Richard Allen trial going on. Maybe some border stuff. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? So we'll talk soon. We'll be back later. Have a good day. JLR investigates. Stay safe.